welcome back to Colonial versus Modern. We've been on a bit of a hiatus, but we are back and picking up where we left off, with the brewing of coffee. We have already talked about the roasting and grinding of coffee, but how is it brewed? And how has the brewing technology progressed over time? Here we see one of the earliest images of coffee in England, in this 1674 woodcut of a coffee house. In this cut, a pot is held by a server on the left. It resembles those found in Arabic coffee houses. The cups on the tables are without handles and are bowl-shaped. Such coffee houses in the 17th and 18th century became the gathering place for all topics of discussion. In 1698, Henri Masson visited London and wrote, "You have all manner of news there. You have a good fire, which you may sit by as long as you please. You have a dish of coffee. You meet your friends for the transaction of business, and all for a penny, if you do not care to spend more." During this time, coffee was often made by boiling the grounds in water. However, Humphrey Broadbent detested this method. In his publication, The Domestic Coffee Man, he wrote, "The common way of making this liquor is to put an ounce of powder to a quart of water, and so let it boil till the head is boiled down. But this is very silly way. If coffee be but very little too much boiled, it is spoiled, and grows either flat or sour. But if by long custom you will not part from your boiling, let it not boil above a minute." Instead, he advocated for steeping, writing, "Put the quantity of powder you intend into your pot, then pour boiling hot water upon the aforesaid powder, and let it stand to infuse 5 minutes before the fire." It may be deduced from Broadbent's writing, the early coffee pots didn't have filters. Instead, spouts were at a sharp angle so that they caught the grounds. However, eventually someone had the idea of putting grounds in a cloth to act as a filter, as the water was poured over them. This method of containing the grounds became very popular, despite the fact that the flavor of the cloth often leached into the coffee. Eventually people began designing pots so that the grounds and filter were held in different compartments than the finished product. In the 1780s, a pot known as the Biggin pot, similar to this drawing, made its debut. A 2-chamber pot, the top was where the filter and grounds were placed. Heated water was poured over the ground. It would run through the grounds before dripping through perforations into the bottom chamber. However, this pot had some problems. If the grounds were too fine, the water could not penetrate through them. On the other hand, if too coarse, the water moved too rapidly through them, resulting in a weak brew. In the early 1800s, a new drip pot designed by a man named de Belois, drawing seen here, was introduced, but was never patented. This pot allowed water to slowly percolate through the grounds and into the bottom chamber. Around the same time, Count Rumford and Mr. Habrot designed similar coffee makers, including the use of a rammer to evenly disperse the grounds and keep the poured water from displacing them. In 1852, 2 French inventors by the name of Mayer and Deforge developed the early cafetière, or French press, seen here, as it is often called in the United States. With this method, the grounds are put into a tankard with hot water. It is set aside to brew, and once finished, the plunger is pressed down, trapping the grounds in the bottom. The Meyer and Defer press, however, did not trap all the grounds, as the press was not sealed. In 1929, two Italians by the name Calamini and Moneta patented a press with a seal. While there were several other patents over the years filed for presses, in 1957, Federico Bondanini applied for a patent with a double filter, seen here, that became the most popular. In 1819, the first modern version of the percolator, patent drawn seen here, was invented by Joseph Henry Marie Lawrence. It was a stovetop percolator. In the United States, in 1865, James Nason received a patent, seen here, for a percolator that used a downflow method. However, it wasn't until 1889 that the stovetop percolator, using the upward movement of boiling water through a tube and then dispersed across a basket of grounds in the top before dripping back down into the base, creating a constant circle of brewing, was introduced by Hanson Goodrich. With his invention, the percolator became the preferred method of brewing coffee in the United States, and remained so until the 1970s. As electricity made its presence in the American household, percolators adapted, and the electric percolator, like the disassembled one seen here, were introduced. Although not common in the United States, vacuum coffee makers, also known as siphon coffee makers, were and still remain popular in other countries. Most of these are hourglass shaped. The first patent for this type of coffee maker was in 1830. However, it was not commercially successful. It wasn't until about 10 years later that Marie Fanny Ameline Massot of Lyon, known as Madame Vassais, in her patent, seen here, designed a vacuum coffee maker that was a hit. These coffee makers work by placing the bottom vessel, which contains the water, over a heat source. The coffee grounds are placed in the upper vessel. A narrow tube connects the two, and as the water in the lower one is heated, the pressure of the expansion forces the heated water through the tube into the top chamber. Once enough time has lapsed, the heat is turned off or removed, and the pressure in the lower level drops, drawing the water through the coffee grounds and back through the tube. Madame Vassais' brew fascinated people. Made of two glass balls, they could watch this process happening. Around the same time as the creation of the Vassais siphon, a Scottish gentleman by the name of Napier designed his own siphon. Though the working principle was the same, his design had the two containers side by side. The electric drip coffee maker came onto the scene in Europe in the 1950s, when the first one was invented by German Gottlob Windmann. It wasn't until about 20 years later that the company Mr. Coffee introduced their version to the American market, similar to the one seen here, and replaced the percolator as the most popular coffee maker. The electric drip coffee maker, also known as the dripillator, is a compilation of several brewing methods brought together. Water is placed in a reservoir, which is connected by a tube to heating elements, with a one-way valve ensuring that the heated water does not return to the reservoir. The pressure formed by the expansion of the water forces it further along the line to a spray head in the lid of the brewer, where it is dispersed over the grounds, which are in a basket. The heated water passes through the grounds in the filter before dripping into a carafe, which is on a heating plate. While Humphrey Broadbent may have only had two ways of brewing coffee available to him, today we have many. So the next time you brew your perfect cup of joe, remember the inventors, of who we only mentioned a few, who helped make your method possible. Thank you for joining us, and we'll be back next week with another Colonial versus Modern.